Good evening and welcome to Reading Grounds. Tonight it is June 16th, 2019. It is Father's Day, at least here in the United States. Let's take a look at Wikipedia, shall we? Today's featured article is the Northeastern Area Command, one of several geographically based commands raised by the Royal Australian Air Force during World War II. It was formed in January 1942 and controlled units in central and northern Queensland and Papua New Guinea. Headquartered at Townsville, Queensland, Northeastern Area Command's responsibilities included air defense, aerial recon, and protection of the sea lanes within its boundaries. In basketball, the Toronto Raptors defeated the Golden State Warriors, becoming the first Canadian team to win the NBA Finals. Two oil tankers have been attacked in the Gulf of Oman amidst heightened tensions between Iran and the United States. In ice hockey, the St. Louis Blues defeated the Boston. What is with all the sports things? I don't care. Following mass protests, Hong Kong's government suspends pursuing proposed legislation regarding extradition. On the day of June 17th in history, in the year 1653, Pope Martin I was arrested in the Lateran Palace before being taken to Constantinople and tried for high treason. In 1631, Mumtaz Mahal, wife of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, died in childbirth. Jahan spent the next 17 years constructing her mausoleum, the Taj Mahal. In 1876, during the Great Sioux War, a band of Lakota Sioux and Cheyenne attacked a United States Army expedition and its Crow and Shoshone allies in the Battle of the Rosebud. In 1940, during World War II, Britain's worst maritime disaster occurred when at least 3,000 people were killed as a result of the troop ship RMS Lancastria's sinking by the Luftwaffe near Saint-Nazaire, France. In 1985, on board Space Shuttle Discovery, Sultan bin Salman Al Saud became the first Arab, the first Muslim, and the first astronaut of royal blood to fly in outer space. It is also the birthday of Bridget Thott, Thott, born 1610. Thought detected. Did you know that during World War II, Elizabeth Erdmann Mack safeguarded the paintings of her first husband, August Mack, who portrayed her more than 200 times? The McCollum Institute, a high school in New Hampshire, closed in 1906 when the number of students had fallen to 11. Philip II of Spain approved funds for a convent because his illegitimate daughter was living there. In 2016, the Indian Army advised replacing pellet guns with non-lethal pepper guns, sonic cannons, and chili grenades to manage violent riots in Jammu and Kashmir. The Indonesian Declaration of Independence was drafted in the home of Japanese Rear Admiral Tadashi Maeda. Maeda? No, I don't really know. Okay, well, I think that's about it for Wikipedia's front page. As I said, today is Father's Day. Um, Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're in good standing with your father, or were in good standing in your father, depending on circumstances. Um, Last time on the stream, we did talk about Normandy, D-Day, the Operation Overlord, and the massacre that occurred there. We also did a lot of reading. We read some fairy tales, and unfortunately, I created independent videos for them, but it seems like for some reason, YouTube either changed the timestamps or the function is a little finicky. But basically, every video that I posted then started either a little too early in the stream or it ended too early. And in fact, all of them ended too early. So the stories weren't quite complete. For the most part, they're good. It's usually only the last couple sentences which got cut off, which tells me that I just need to be careful. Um, But those videos have been unlisted now. If you at all still want to listen to those readings, they are on the previous stream. However, at some point when I run out of when I run out of fairy tales to read, I am going to reread those and put them back up. Um, because that is part of the reason why I have this stream is to do those readings. But I don't want to do them right now because we've already read them. They're still fresh. There's no need to do that. In the meantime, however, I would like to continue on reading some of the fairy tales, and I'm going to keep doing that. I still have my big old book here, a lot of which is fairy tales most people don't know about. Things like the iron stove. Well, I guess everyone does know what an iron stove is, but nobody knows the story behind it. The tragic backstory behind using basic iron to construct your stove. I'm trying to decide for myself if it's worth reading some of the darker Grimm fairy tale stories. I know I did read Little Red Riding Hood last time, which is, of course, a classic, but it is also very dark, and I don't know. I suppose it's probably okay. And these streams usually aren't family friendly to begin with, even if they are hosted by man children. As I get into more, the majority of this book that I have is lesser known fairy tales. And I don't know if it's worth reading them or if I should read them on my own or on stream. I suppose for prosperity, I could just read some of them. And if it doesn't work out, just not post the video. That's easy enough. Of course, some of them, like the videos I did last time, they're famous enough that there are depictions of them. There are drawings, like by the late great Paul Gustave Doré, um, who did the picture which I used for Little Red Riding Hood. He's one of my favorite artists personally. But unfortunately, with some of these others that are more obscure or just generic, there isn't necessarily a corresponding picture, which I suppose is fine. Like I did with Bearskin, I didn't actually use a depiction of the fairy tale. I just used a random stock photo on the internet. Hopefully I won't be sued for using those. But oh well. The Giant and the Tailor, Tom Thumb, Tom Thumb's Travels, the Elves, the Old Beggar Woman, the Jew Among Thorns, King Thrushbeard, Clever Gretel, Fitcher's Bird, the Robber Bridegroom, Old Hildebrand, the Goose Girl, the Skillful Huntsman. Let's try the Princess in Disguise. This is a picture from duke.edu. So hopefully that means that it's reasonably public domain. Oh, I need to be careful. Anytime I look up old drawings and art of fairy tales, I get so enraptured by the depictions. They're quite captivating. Some beautiful artwork. Very unique as well. You don't see a lot of things in that style in these days. Hmm. Apparently, there's a Wikipedia entry on King Thrushbeard. Perhaps I'll read that one as well. There's also the juniper tree, which is a fairy tale near and dear to my heart. It was actually the first thing I ever read on this stream. Not this one in particular, but when I started on twitch.tv. I haven't grown much since then, but that was the first story which I ever read on Reading Grounds. That was a lot of fun, and still one of my favorite fairy tales, even though it is very, well, very grim, for lack of a better word. It is sort of funny to me that, um, in modern society, not just this current generation, but in general, um, there's a very uh, people are very sensitive about what they show their kids. They don't want things to be too violent or too dark, which is all well and good. But you also look at these old depictions where people don't necessarily care so much. There's a huge difference between uh, Disney princesses and the original stories that they came from. That is not medium sized. What kind of garbage is that? Whoops, my anarchy symbol. Princess in disguise. This princess, which I'm about to put on for the image for tonight, doesn't really look like she's in disguise, but you know what? I don't care. It's not even my image. Like I said, this came from an educational website, so, you know, I'm not stealing it, I don't think. Yeah, she doesn't look very disguisey. So from now on, I think what I'm going to be doing is I will give a deliberate air of silence. Now, the rule of thumb when you're broadcasting anything like this, whether it's on the internet or on the radio, is to generally not have any dead air. It's anathema. But you know what? I don't care. And I don't have anything to do in the meantime. And when I'm creating these highlights, the intent is to uh, give a bit of cutoff prevention. So there will be some deliberate silences instead of just the awkward ones that we're used to. Probably give about 5 seconds of each because that is about the maximum amount of time I need. So there will be 5 seconds of silence, and then there will be 5 seconds of reading. Or I'm sorry, 5 seconds of silence before the reading and 5 seconds of silence after the reading. This is The Princess in Disguise, a grim fairy tale. A king once had a wife with golden hair, who was so beautiful that none on earth could be found equal to her. It happened that she fell ill, and as soon as she knew she must die, she sent for the king and said to him, "After my death, I know you will marry another wife, But you must promise me that, however beautiful she may be, if she is not as beautiful as I am, and has not golden hair like mine, you will not marry her." The king had no sooner given his promise than she closed her eyes and died. For a long time he refused to be comforted, and thought it was impossible he could ever take another wife. At length his counselors came to him and said, "A king should not be unmarried. We ought to have a queen." So he at last consented, and then messengers were sent far and wide to find a bride whose beauty should equal that of the dead queen. But none was to be found in the whole world, for even when equally beautiful they had not golden hair. So the messengers returned without obtaining what they sought. Now the king had a daughter who was quite as beautiful as her dead mother, and had also golden hair. She had all this while having been grown, and very soon the king noticed how exactly she resembled her dead mother. So he sent for his counselors and said to them, "I will marry my daughter. She is the image of my dead wife, and no other bride can be found to enable me to keep my promise to her." You know what? I don't think I'm going to read this one. This is a bad one for Father's Day. I draw the line at I draw the line at incest. That's where I draw the line. So never mind, you're off the hook, princess in disguise. You will not be read. And I know that the story isn't necessarily condoning incest, but I gotta draw the line somewhere. And for me that's it. Alright. So I've never read King Thrushbeard, but I did happen to find a couple depictions while I was looking for the Princess in Disguise one. Hmm, that's interesting. Like I said, this particular story, even though I've never heard it, I don't know what it's about. It does have a Wikipedia article, which is kind of small. Um, it says that the story is an Arn Thompson Type 900. That's really interesting. I don't know what that means. That's makes it sound like a firearm or something. Anyways, King Thrushbeard. Yeah, hopefully that's good. I don't know anything about this, so I'm going to be discovering it along with you, dear reader, unless, of course, you already know where it comes from. It is on page 43 of my book. Yes, it seems to be kind of a short one as well. Okay. King Thrushbeard by the Brothers Grimm. A king had a daughter who was beautiful beyond measure, but so proud and overbearing that none of her suitors were good enough for her. She not only refused one after the other, but made a laughing stock of them. Once the king appointed a great feast, and bade all the marriageable men to it, far and near. And they were all put in rows, according to their rank and station. First came the kings, then the princes, the dukes, the earls, the barons, and lastly the noblemen. The princess was led in front of the rows, but she had a mocking epithet for each one. One was too fat. "What a tub!" said she. Another too tall. "Long and lean is ill to be seen," said she. A third too short. "Fat and short, not fit to court," said she. A fourth was too pale. "A regular death's head." A fifth too red-faced. "A gamecock," she called him. The sixth was not well made enough. "Green wood ill dried," cried she. So every one had something against him, and she made especially merry over a good king who was very tall, and whose chin had grown a little peaked. "Only look," cried she, laughing, "he has a chin like a thrush's beak." And from that time they called him King Thrushbeard. But the old king, when he saw that his daughter mocked every one, and scorned all the assembled suitors, swore in his anger that she would have the first beggar that came to the door for her husband. A few days afterwards came a travelling ballad singer, and sang under the window in hopes of a small alms. When the king heard of it, he said that he must come in, and so the ballad singer entered in his dirty tattered garments, and sang before the king and his daughter. When he had done, he asked for a small reward, but the king said, "Your song has so well pleased me that I will give you my daughter to wife." The princess was horrified, but the king said, "I took an oath to give you to the first beggar that came, and so it must be done." There was no remedy. The priest was fetched, and she had to be married to the ballad singer out of hand. When all was done, the king said, "Now, as you are a beggar wife, you can no longer stay in my castle, so off with you and your husband." The beggar man led her away, and she was obliged to go forth with him on foot. On the way they came to a great wood, and she asked, "Oh, whose forest is this, so thick and fine?" He answered, "It is King Thrushbeard's, and might have been thine." And she cried, "Oh, I was a silly young thing, I'm afeard. Would I have taken that good King Thrushbeard?" Then they passed through a meadow, and she asked, "Oh, whose is this meadow, so green and so fine?" He answered, "It is King Thrushbeard, and might have been thine." And she cried, "I was a silly young thing, I'm afeard. Would I had taken that good good King Thrushbeard." Then they passed through a great town, and she asked, "Whose is this city, so great and so fine?" He answered, "Oh, it is King Thrushbeard's, and might have been thine." And she cried, "I was a silly young thing, I'm afeard. Would I had taken that good King Thrushbeard." Then said the beggar man, "It does not please me to hear you always wishing for another husband. Am I not good enough for you?" At last they came to a very small house, and she said, "Oh, dear me, what poor little house do I see? And whose I would know may the wretched hole be?" The man answered, "That is my house and yours, where we must live together." So she had to stoop before she could go in at the door. "Where are the servants?" asked the king's daughter. "What servants?" answered the beggar man. "What you want to have done you must do yourself. Make a fire quickly, and put on water, and cook me some food. I am very tired." But the king's daughter understood nothing about fire making and cooking, and the beggar man had to lend a hand himself in order to manage it all. And when they had eaten their poor fare, they went to bed, but the man called up his wife very early in the morning in order to clean the house. For a few days they lived in this indifferent manner, until they came to the end of their store. "Wife," said the man, "this will not do, stopping here and earning nothing. You must make baskets." So he went out and cut willows and brought them home, and she began to weave them, but the hard twigs wounded her tender hands. "I see this will not do," said the man. "You had better try spinning." She sat her down and tried to spin, but the harsh thread cut her soft fingers so that blood flowed. "Look now," said the man, "you are no good at any sort of work. I made a bad bargain when I took you. I must see what I can do to make a trade of pots and earthen vessels. You can sit in the market and offer them for sale." "Oh dear," thought she, "suppose while I am selling in the market, people belonging to my father's kingdom should see me, how they would mock at me." But there was no help for it. She had to submit, or else die of hunger. The first day all went well. People bought her wares eagerly, because she was so beautiful, and gave her whatever she asked. And some of them gave her the money and left the pots after all behind them. And they lived on these earnings as long as they had lasted. And then the man brought a number of new pots. So she seated herself in a corner of the market, and stood the wares before her for sale. All at once a drunken horse soldier came plunging by, and rode straight into the midst of her pots, breaking them into 1,000 pieces. She could do nothing for weeping. "Oh dear, what will become of me?" cried she. "What will my husband say?" And she hastened home and told him her misfortune. "Who ever heard of such a thing as sitting in the corner of the market with earthenware pots?" said the man. "Now leave off crying. I see you are not fit for any regular work. I have been asking at your father's castle if they have a kitchen maid, and they say they don't mind taking you. Oh, excuse me. I have been asking at your father's castle if they want a kitchen maid, and they say they don't mind taking you. At any rate, you will get your victuals free." And the king's daughter became a kitchen maid, to be at the cook's beck and call, and to do the hardest work. In each of her pockets she fastened a little pot, and brought home in them whatever was left, and upon that she and her husband were fed. It happened one day, when the wedding of the eldest prince was celebrated, the poor woman went upstairs, and stood by the parlour door to see what was going on. And when the place was lighted up, and the company arrived, each person handsomer than the one before, and all was brilliancy and splendour, she thought on her own fate with a sad heart, and bewailed her former pride and haughtiness, which had brought her so low, and plunged her in so great poverty. And as the rich and delicate dishes, smelling so good, were carried to and fro every now and then, the servants would throw her a few fragments, which she would put in her pockets, intending to take home. And then the prince himself passed in, clothed in silk and velvet, with a gold chain round his neck. And when he saw the beautiful woman standing in the doorway, he seized her hand, and urged her to dance with him. But she refused, all trembling, for she saw it was King Thrushbeard, who had come to court her, whom she had turned away with mocking. It was of no use her resisting. He drew her into the room, and all at once the band to which her pockets were fastened broke, and the pots fell out, and the soup ran about, and the fragments were scattered all around. And when the people saw that, there was a great laughter and mocking, and she felt so ashamed that she wished herself 1,000 fathoms underground. She rushed to the door to fly from the place, when a man caught her just on the steps, and when she looked at him, it was King Thrushbeard again. He said to her in a kind tone, "Do not be afraid. I and the beggar man with whom you lived in the wretched little hut are one. For love of you I disguised myself, and it was I who broke your pots in the guise of a horse soldier. I did all that to bring down your proud heart, and to punish your haughtiness, which caused you to mock at me." Then she wept bitterly, and said, "I have done great wrong, and am not worthy to be your wife." But he said, "Take courage. The evil days are gone over. Now let us keep our wedding day." Then came the ladies in waiting, and put on her splendid clothing, and her father came, and the whole court, and wished her joy on her marriage with King Thrushbeard. Then the merrymaking began in good earnest. I cannot help wishing that you and I could have been there too. Okay. Well, hopefully that video doesn't cut off. I think 5 seconds should be good enough for cutoff time. Um, I know some people in uploading individual videos, not even highlights from streams like this one, but just general individual videos. Um, they oftentimes they have really long cutoff times, and I always wondered about that, but now I think I understand. Anyways, I kind of like that story. I'm sure these days a lot of people would say that they might say that it's a bit misogynistic. I don't necessarily. I mean, I can't speak for the era in which it appeared, but certainly it's a good message for any gender. The importance of gratitude. Certainly, that's something I could learn from. I'm very judgmental of people. It's a bad habit. I'm glad I read that story. That was a good one. Just going to take a moment here to mark down in my book because I like to mark down the stories that I've already read so that I can keep track, because otherwise I'll forget. Let's see here. There's one story in here called The Table, the Ass, and the Stick, which is still a popular story, but it's completely different. uh, it's funny, like it's how certain words which were once innocent are now uh, sexual in tone. Um, back in way back in the day, people used to say if you needed to talk to someone or like just a serious like heart to heart talk, it was called straight dick for some reason. So there's this comic panel floating around from way back in the day where Iron Man is talking to Captain America and he's like, "Sounds like you need some solid dick." Or no, sorry, some straight dick. And Captain America is like, "Yeah, maybe I do. Maybe I do." And there's another one of kind of a famous, or I guess infamous comic from Silver Age Batman, I think, where the word boner was once used to describe like a mistake, a joke, or something. So the Joker, he makes a mistake in one of his heists, and so there's headlines in the newspaper. It says like "World laughs at Joker's boner," and he's like, "Laugh at my boner, will they? I'll show them. I'll show them how many boners the Joker can make." It's funny in retrospect, although the comic itself is like, yeah, just it's a straight dick of the old Silver Age. It's not particularly interesting. Kind of makes you wonder, like, what the next euphemism for. I mean, I guess, like, really, uh, the whatever the next euphemism for penis is like already a euphemism. You know what I mean? Because I mean, people are so sexual these days. They're just always making jokes. Especially me. I'm the worst. Let's see here. The Griffin and I think I might just go ahead and read The Maiden Without Hands, which is kind of another story about gratitude. If I can find a good image of it. It's kind of funny to me that there are people that want like a summary of like fairy tales because I look up some of these and that's some of the top results like oh such and such summary and it's like it is 2 pages, just read it, it's fine. You don't need a summary. The summary is going to be like just as long as the story itself. It breaks my weary heart. And there are some. I mean, this is kind of one of the more famous Grimm fairy tales. Um, but it's also like, I mean, it's not like Disney famous, but it's like people that are weird and like fairy tales famous because it's it's a trippy story, kind of horrific. Hmm. Trying to find a good image. Probably just go with the Wikipedia one if I can find a better resolution for it. That's a good one. It's kind of boring compared to the actual story itself, but you know, this stream is boring, so it kind of works out. Like I said, it's kind of boring. So thinking about it, this is like these are ostensibly, I think that's how that's pronounced. Um, I mean, these are like children's stories. Like that's why people came up with fairy tales was to warn their kids about things. I kind of mentioned that like it's weird how in the old days that seemed to be okay, but then these days like not so much. But thinking about it, sometimes like it doesn't happen as often these days. But sometimes kid stories are pretty metal. Like the Gremlins movie from 1984, I think it was released. Uh, Kimry just showed up on stream. She says, "Sorry, I'm late." Yeah, that's what she said. Thanks for coming on the stream, Kimry. But like that movie Gremlins, which is it's a kids movie. But I remember watching it when I was way too young to be watching kids movie. Uh, sorry, too young to be watching kids movie. Too young to be watching that kids movie. I was like, I must have been like 5 or so at the time, and like that movie was like terrifying. Like I had nightmares about those gremlins, and like that was like the earliest nightmare I can remember having. And I even watched a little. I didn't finish it, but I like watched it. Um, I think it was on Amazon Prime, but I decided to check it out again. And that movie is still terrifying. Like I'm not like easily scared by movies. In fact, most of the time I just like not scared at all. But like that movie is disturbing. Like the part where the gremlins like in the blender, and like there's that like nightmarish moment where like the one evil gremlin hops into the pool, and you're like, oh my word! Now all these gremlins are gonna be effing things up. Like oh, it stresses me out. Uh, but and so like something like that, that's a horrifying movie. And I don't even know if that one has a moral, which is more than, or I guess less than you can say for fairy tales. Um, Granted, I wouldn't necessarily consider Gremlins to be a kids movie, even though it technically is one, because that movie is, ugh, like, ugh, I can't watch. I couldn't finish it. I was just so like stressed out by it. But and I have a pretty thick skin. Like I can watch movies where a lot of terrible stuff happens, and I just walk away like, oh yes, here's my artistic interpretation. But anyways, so The Maiden Without Hands is one of those grim fairy tales that's a little metal. It's kind of trippy, it's kind of violent, but that's the way we like it. That's how you know it's good. So I'm going to start that. The Maiden Without Hands by the Brothers Grimm. A miller, who had gradually become very poor, had nothing left but his mill and a large apple tree behind it. One day, when he went into the forest to gather wood, an old man whom he had never seen before came toward him and said, "Why do you take the trouble to cut down wood? I will give you great riches if you promise to let me have what stands behind your mill." "That can be no other than my apple tree," thought the miller. "I possess nothing else." So he said to the old man, "Yes, I will let you have it." Then the stranger smiled maliciously and said, "In 3 years I will come again to claim what belongs to me." And after saying this, he departed. As soon as the miller returned home, his wife came toward him and said, "Miller, from whence have all these riches come suddenly into our house? All at once every drawer and chest has become full of gold. No one brought it here, and I know not where it came from." "Oh," replied her husband, "I know all about it. A strange man whom I met in the wood promised me great treasure if I would make over to him what stood behind the mill. I knew I'd nothing but that large apple tree, so I gave him my promise." "Oh, husband," the wife said in alarm, "that must have been the wizard. He did not mean the apple tree, but our daughter, who was behind the mill, sweeping out the court." The miller's daughter was a modest and beautiful maiden, and lived in innocence and obedience to her parents for 3 years, until the day came on which the wicked wizard was to claim her. She knew he was coming, and after washing till she was pure and clean as snow, she drew a circle of white chalk and stood within it. The wizard made his appearance very early, but he did not dare to venture over the white circle. Therefore he could not get near her. In great anger he said to the miller, "Take away every drop of water, that she may not wash, otherwise I shall have no power over her." The frightened miller did as he desired, but on the next morning, when the frightened wizard came again, her hands were as pure and clean as ever, for she had wept over them. Jeez. Okay. Hopefully now it's working. Oh boy, that's good.